President, I rise to speak on the Foreign Influence Transparency Scheme Bill 2017. Labor believes in transparency, and we've seen in the American 2016 presidential elections, Brexit and the French presidential election attempts by foreign powers to interfere with and influence the democratic processes of those countries. Labor is determined to shine a light on any covert or deceptive foreign influence which has the potential to corrode the governmental and political processes of our nation. We take the safeguarding of our free and fair elections very, very seriously. It was these fundamental beliefs in mind that Labor approached the PJCIS inquiry into the Foreign Influence Transparency Scheme Bill. We welcome the fact that the government has recognised the need for significant fixes to its earlier bill, and there's been certainly a significant narrowing of the cohort of people and organisations that would be caught by this bill. In particular, Labor has worked constructively to ensure that charities, arts organisations, unions and religious organisations will generally be exempt from the operation of the scheme. The work of Australian charities here and abroad has had a tremendous impact on the lives of millions of people. Labor has always wanted this to work, to continue without burdening our charities with unnecessary red tape. Labor also welcomes amendments that will create an exemption for arts organisations. Fostering cross-cultural artistic exchange is an essential part of maintaining and enhancing a vibrant multicultural Australia. This bill in its original form was far too broad in its definitions. For example, the original provisions could have gone as far as to impact the work of Indigenous rangers. Indigenous rangers and their work in Indigenous protected areas is of incredible public benefit to Australia, but it's more than that. It has profoundly significant impacts on the lives of First Nations people. We talk in this House about closing the gap. We talk in this House of employment and the importance of employment opportunities. For our Indigenous rangers across the coastlines of our country, they are doing tremendous work. They need far more support and certainly not red tape. They are tackling feral animal impacts, invasive weeds, ensuring fire is well managed, protecting cultural sites and managing tourism impacts. They are leaders in their communities under the guidance of their elders. In my own home community of Borroloola in the Gulf of Carpentaria, we have 4 language groups: the Yanyuwa, the Garwa, the Mara and the Gurangi peoples. For the Yanyuwa, we have the Liantha Rangers. Liantha means our spiritual origin comes from the sea country, and it is the sea country that the Liantha Rangers look after. They protect the coastlines. They monitor the dugongs and sea turtles. They look at the harvesting that takes place, and they certainly keep an eye out on any illegal activity. They certainly do Australia proud. They certainly do our communities proud. Labor supports this critical work not only to create jobs where they are desperately needed, but to ensure that our beautiful country retains its natural and cultural heritage. We will seek change in any legislation that unreasonably inhibits or limits this kind of work, or indeed those advocating for it. Whether they be Indigenous rangers and traditional owners themselves, many of whom I meet with regularly across the Northern Territory and certainly here in Canberra, whether it be the non-profit charities they work with or indeed their own charities they are forming to take control of their own circumstances. The recent FITS legislation, as proposed, significantly threatened the ability of Indigenous rangers and their partners to advocate freely for positive policy in Australia with regards to remote Indigenous jobs and a health environment and cultural heritage. Indigenous ranges are also incredibly significant because of the work of our women rangers, our strong women rangers, who have an opportunity to stand on par as carers for country. That's just one of the reasons my colleagues and I, particularly Mark Dreyfus, Andrew Lee and Senator McAllister, were adamant the bill had to go through the committee process. I'm pleased to say that our work was accepted by the committee members opposite, including Senator Abetz, whom I understand presented detailed questioning to ensure the feral camel issue was not being used for ill intent by other countries, somehow through Rangers' work. This is quite a unique concern, but nonetheless I do congratulate the Senator for his diligence and look forward to his further insights on the feral camel issue, which I know many rangers, especially in our desert regions across Central Australia, all along the Aranda and the Anangu country, are working to address. But more seriously, we must protect our democracy and we must protect our environment and culture. Part of that means being able to freely speak up, every Australian, for those things we do hold dear. Our rangers and Indigenous protected areas are doing wonderful work. Our country needs people. That's an important theme of First Nations rangers, particularly the many First Australians who have always cared for it. I will always fight for the expansion and security of that work in this place, and I hope every senator here will see why and will stand strong in that too. We have a huge nation. We have much to care for. Let's work to extend and secure these jobs and that work more broadly, not threaten them inadvertently or otherwise through legislation that is badly drafted, rushed and ill-considered. While we're on the subject of foreign influence, I just wanted to make a few brief comments also surrounding the cuts to the ABC and this government's efforts to discredit and certainly dilute Australia's perception of our public broadcaster. And I am passionate about this issue because it does impact. And one of those impacts was the ABC having to make the decision to discontinue ABC shortwave radio services in both rural Australia as well as the Pacific. Again, shortwave radio, where it was in Northern Australia, is now just silence, where our farmers and cattle stations, our Indigenous rangers, our fishermen and women out on the seas would use the shortwave radio of the ABC. And now, no communication. It's interesting, and I have to say, to note that a government who claims to want to tackle foreign influence wants to diminish Australian content and create a void for other agents of influence to fill. And I am talking, of course, about the recent news reports which suggest Radio Australia's former shortwave frequencies are now being used by China Radio International, the country's state-owned overseas broadcaster. Senators, if we really want to counter foreign influence, it's hugely important that we have a properly funded public broadcaster that Australians can rely upon both home and overseas.